Scary Stories Collection 5 Short Horror Stories. Written by Stories from the Attic. Narrated by Robin McConnell. Monsters. It was the same day that I received my Ph.D. that my grandmother shattered everything I thought I knew. In total, I had been studying for 7 years, beginning with zoology and then transferring to straight biology, completing my master's a year later, and whilst taking up teaching duties at the university, completing my Ph.D. over the following years. By that point I was an academic of some standing, and the papers I had written had gained some attention within some select circles interested in those sorts of things. But I was tired. 7 years is a long time. The process of reaching these milestones in my academic progress was exhausting. The hours and intellectual demands taxing on both the body and mind. Not to mention the crippling homesickness that I had felt ever since starting my undergraduate qualification. I had left my home in Turkey aged 19 for a scholarship place at a top university in the United States. Whilst I loved my friends, the lecturers, and the challenge of the courses I completed there, and thanked God every day for the opportunities I had been given, from day one I felt the nagging weight on my shoulders, the feeling in my chest like a hollow space, a gap, where something was missing. I had first felt it sitting in a fast food restaurant just off campus. In the frenzied excitement and hectic activity of arriving in a new place and meeting everyone, I had missed breakfast. By the time I'd moved into my student digs, lunch had also fallen by the wayside, and when finally one of my new friends suggested that we grab a bite to eat, I was famished. When the food finally arrived, I regarded it with a certain amount of disbelief, and felt, in the pit of my stomach, somewhere below its angry growling, the first sharp pangs of homesickness. At home, grabbing a meal on the streets meant visiting a jokanta, mountains of buttered pilaf rice studded with nahut, the chunky swollen chickpeas bathed in a thin tomato sauce. What I got instead hardly even qualified as a burger, seeing as how it looked nothing like the advertisement and more like the server had spent the past half hour sitting on it. I chewed it anyway and tried to prepare myself mentally for years of similar disappointments. The winters were especially hard, not because they were more severe, but because they never quite made it too severe. In my US home, the skies simply greyed into a seemingly eternal cycle of drizzle and rain. The temperature dropped, but not dramatically, not enough to change daily life into an entirely different prospect. Winter in the US was a seemingly endless string of damp commutes, sniffling noses, and steamy classrooms, all framed by the darkness that greeted me when I rose in the morning and waited for me outside of the lecture halls and laboratories to accompany me home when I ended my day. In Turkey, winter was different. There, winter was stark, fresh with raw, bracing clarity. Vistas of snow orbiting, ice-clean air into which we could step to collect pomegranate and citrus fruits, or to chop firewood to light the soba. The metallic construction that would heat our homes, wrapped and cloaked like cocoons, laden with thick blankets, heavy rugs, and roughly stitched cushions, as we huddled in comfort against the cold. It was in these settings, in the warm glow of the fire, sipping amber tea from tulip-shaped glasses, that my grandmother would share with me the folk-tales of her youth and horror stories of her nightmares. The same stories from which she plucked the thing that made my studies seem to crumble. My grandmother was an interesting woman in almost every respect. For me, she seemed always to glow with a golden aura of warmth, her toothless grin and sparkling eyes speaking always of mirth and mischief that bubbled just below the surface. For her family, and especially for children, she was this soft, quilted figure of benevolent matriarchy. Only on exceedingly rare occasions did we catch a glimpse of the granite will and resilience that had gotten her family through. For there was little doubt in my mind that beneath the layers of cardigans and shawls, my grandmother was as hard as nails. Having grown up in a rural village where shepherding was still a common profession,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?